Hey friends, this is Jeff. Big month for us on YouTube and Patreon. We will continue to release our best content on these platforms moving forward. Well worth subscribing to Patreon and YouTube. The links are in the show notes. And speaking of Patreon, all of our Patreon releases flow easily into your podcast feed. So once you sign up, you can simply listen to them right there on your podcast platform of choice. This November 2024, we will be posting 3 very long, like 2-3 hour long interviews with the most informed people we know about their Enneagram type. The first up is Dr. Mary Slattery, Enneagram 6. Dr. Slattery has studied Enneagram under all the most amazing thinkers and routinely elevates the hearts of 6s in ways I have heard nowhere else. Lots of clarity and wisdom, and her interview will post November 8th. Next is the Joel Stabile, talking shop about Enneagram 7s. Joel, likewise, may have more conversations with Enneagram scholars than anybody else on the planet, and he is able to articulate the heart of 7s with real insight and understanding. That will post on November 15th. And lastly is our good friend Erica Jobs. Erica had one of the very first Enneagram podcasts, and as an Enneagram 8 has sat in this material for over 10 years. Her perspective on Enneagram is different than ours, but she is also responsible for some of the real breakthroughs TJ and I have had in understanding Enneagram. This is some of our best work and will be the Patreon releases for November. Then, coming in December 2024, we are going to release the next 3 drafted chapters of our upcoming book, Around the Circle. So more than half of our new book is up online for you to digest. Again, if you sign up for a paid membership prior to January 1st, we will send you 2 signed books. In 2025, we will send you the physical published version of Around the Circle next year, as well as a signed first edition of my first book, 7. We will also answer up to 3 Enneagram questions per month for you, and you will get the sheer joy and delight of helping us help other people find and enjoy the Enneagram. That's our plug. Thanks for listening. May all good things be yours. Friends, it's Jeff. This is the first of our 2-part conversation with Tyler Zach, adding a big conclusion to our deep dive into the Enneagram instincts and conversations about subtypes. You can find part 2 of our conversation for free at our Patreon page and on YouTube, both of which have links in the show notes. While you're at Patreon, do check out what's going on there. If you sign up to be a member, you will receive a number of great things. The first few chapters of our upcoming book, the full version of our interviews, and if you sign up before January, you'll get a signed copy of the print version of our first book, Around the Circle, which will release next year. So go take a look, and may all good things be yours. I'm Jeff Cook.
And I'm TJ Wilson.
And this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
Boss.
Hey.
So sometimes you need like the post-game discussion. You know about sports ball.
I know
don't you?
all about postmortems.
TJ and sports ball are postmortems. This is his wheelhouse. It's critiquing things after they've already happened.
Yep.
Push into your past tools.
I am on board. You want me to tell you the things that happened during the game by watching the things that happened during the game? I am about it.
Sometimes you need to do a post-game review with the experts. Like, so I'm a big football fan. The guys who've been playing forever get on the TV and they say, well, this is what the quarterback was doing right. This is what he's doing wrong. I see them pushing this forward in the future. That's what
And
we're
then
going to do
John
here.
Madden draws on the screen and it's a whole thing. Yeah. Sports.
You and I are in the arena throwing punches, hopefully pissing some people off.
Right.
And now it's time for the review. Now it's
Okay.
time for the let's talk about some of this stuff with an expert.
Okay.
Friends, if you've been a long time listener, Tyler Zach has been with us in the past and done some fantastic work with us talking about relationships in the triad. I believe at the beginning of 2024, if you're looking for it. But Tyler's one of the most informed people I know on subtypes and instincts, and he graciously is come on to help us out. So welcome, Tyler.
Hey, it's great to be here, and just love every chance I get to hang out with you guys. And just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done, the research you've done that you put into this series. People don't realize how much time it takes to do what you guys just did. And you're not charging. The series isn't on sale for $197. You guys have put a lot of work into this on the side. I mean, you have full-time jobs and you're doing this on the side and you're doing researching. So I just really appreciate it. I've listened to hours now of these podcasts and I've found them really, really beneficial, and they've really stretched me. So you came out of the gate saying, you should wait 5 years to learn about subtypes. And I'm like, well, I feel like we should use them right away. And it's caused me to wrestle with subtypes more than I ever have. And so I've appreciated the journey.
Excellent.
Quick word on Tyler. I want to elevate his work because it's truly worthy. Routinely, approximately 3 times a year, Tyler is putting on online summits in which he is doing the hard work of gathering, 20 or 30 Enneagram experts and having them discuss a topic. And it's really impressive stuff. Well worth finding. You can find that at tylerzach.com. He's also a coach. He is also the author of 9 faith-based studies, which have done quite well, apparently. So as an author, like the target is selling about 20,000 books, and Tyler is fast approaching that number. So congratulations. Like that's kind of in my mind, that is the number of like, you actually can do this as a job or you can't. And so well done.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I started the journey 5 years ago. And as a 3, I'm like, oh, this sounds great. And I want to help people make this super practical and have reflection questions and action steps and create a guide for every type. I didn't really realize it would take 5 full years of writing these. But hey, it did it. It's 5 years is up, and type 5 book just came out. So now the whole series is done. And it really is a labor of love to people who are coming from a faith-based background. So yeah. That's something fun that just happened this past week.
Thanks. Well, you can obviously find those on the Amazon and Kindle and places fine books are sold.
Yep.
And with that, I get to hand the baton off to Tyler. Tyler actually is going to lead this discussion about again the post game on instincts and subtypes. So where are you going to take us, pal?
Well, yeah. Well, first off, I have 2 reasons why we should learn about subtypes right away rather than waiting 5 years. And would love to kind of share that, and then you guys can push back, and TJ can give some colorful commentary, and
okay, colorful. All right, I'm in.
So, and this is just, I don't see myself as an expert in this area. I feel like I've learned a lot from people like Beatrice Chestnut, Aranio Pius, and I've really taken what they've done and synthesized it down. So I created like a 27 subtypes PDF, a guide that people can download and just look at, sort of a summation of what Beatrice Chestnut has been teaching, who said that she got the subtype descriptions from Claudio Naranjo, the founder of the Enneatypes. And you guys have mentioned some of this on the podcast already. But so I feel like I've been curating it, and then it's been really useful for me for a couple of reasons. One, I think to help with accurate typing and to prevent mistyping. So I just had a conversation with a fellow Enneagram coach who's been doing this for quite a while. And she said that she coached type 8 for 4 months. before she realized that they actually weren't a type 8. They were actually a sexual 4, the dominant sexual 4. So if she would have known about the subtypes a little bit earlier, she said that she maybe would have been able to catch that and just prevent that from happening. And you guys have done a fantastic job of going through all of the different subtypes. And, you've talked about some of these already, but sexual 4s can look like type 8s, like I just mentioned. Sexual 1s can look like 8s. Sexual or counterphobic 6s can look like 8s. Sexual or pairing, as you say, I like that word, pairing, 5s can look like 4s. Social 9s can look like 3s. Social 8s can look like 3s. Social 3s can look like 8s. Self-pres 4s can look like 1s or 3s. Social 7s, especially females, can look like 2s. Self-pres 3s, like myself, can look like 5s or 1s. And actually, when I took the test for the first time, the ready test, I actually tested as a 5 and a 3. It kind of tied for my top score.
Right.
So I didn't know. Which one was, because I looked at the type 3 description and I didn't really resonate with some of the common teaching out there. Like I saw I don't outwardly boast about my accomplishments or try to talk about them too much. And so I just wasn't resonating with some of the common descriptions. So, I think subtypes can help us kind of course correct some of the mistakes that some of the authors or influencers make, because when the stuff that they're putting out there on social media or in books oftentimes is one-sided, or will exaggerate or amplify certain characteristics of the type to the exclusion of others. So there's kind of like misinformation floating around. And I think if you can get to the subtypes faster, you can maybe catch some of those mistakes. So yeah, what do you guys think about that?
You want to take it?
Sure. Well, I have a couple of thoughts right off the bat. I think you're exactly right in the space where someone has a dominant instinct that makes them look like the counter type. Like there's a handful of these quote unquote counter types that just look different than the other two instincts. And that is I think the main space where subtype work is useful, is helping like find that counter type that looks a little bit different. So the 6 who's actually driven by fear, but goes against their fear and might look a lot more aggressive than the normal 6. That is a great space to understand that there is an instinct that is influencing how your behavior actually comes out. And even in your case, I think the fact of the social 3, like if you're only reading that these people want gold stars and you're not someone who ever asked for gold stars, then obviously you're going to think that doesn't align with me. But then the subtype comes in and says, oh, you kind of want the gold stars, but you're not going to broadcast that. Like that, like getting back to that motive, I think when anyone finds themselves in that position where they are sort of stuck in the place where it's like, these things resonate, but this part doesn't, like, then is a spot to look into the subtypes. And I'll add the caveat that I think is really important here is that this is the space where it is so helpful to have a good and knowledgeable teacher or coach. And especially for all of the teachers and coaches who are out there, like I've fallen into this trap. I've done it recently, even. Like if we are not speaking from a place of actual information, and like if we as coaches are not tapped into this knowledge and giving space for people, if we're only really using like the base level knowledge that we got from the same book that everyone else has read, then we're not really coaches. What we're doing is just regurgitating someone else's information. And it means that we can't point people in the direction of, oh, you think you might be a 3, but this doesn't fit. Well, how about this subtype? Because we as people who have studied the work, we should be able to see those nuances, right? And so I think that is the space where if you're having trouble finding your type, get with a coach, get with someone who actually knows about the instincts, who knows about the differences and the nuances of type, and remembers to keep coming back to what is the motivation? What is the reason you're doing these things? Because as we all know, behavior can look the same across different types.
So I think that's where we have common ground is you can kind of see some of the usefulness of knowing the counter type to kind of
Right.
catch some of those things. So yeah,
Right.
I think we have common ground there. And I would say too, I think it's helpful for the coaches in particular to understand this quicker because they're the ones that are helping type people and those sort of things.
Yep.
Whereas I can get why you'd not want a novice or newbie to come in and get kind of overwhelmed with all of the 27 subtypes or
Right.
or the stackings and just like kind of lose it.
I got two quick things. One, TJ and I will be releasing our first book summer 2025. In the back will be a chart. It will be a mistyping chart. And we've worked with somebody else's really lackluster, often wrong mistyping chart for many years. And so it's time for us to do our own. And the list that you just produced, Tyler, I think it's fantastic in terms of, we need to focus on this for a second. And I think that that's quite wise. On mistyping, it seems to me a lot of times when behavior comes forward in our description of the types, that's when the mistyping takes place.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so essential for those who are teachers, coaches, those who are leading others into Enneagram to really double down, triple down on motive and just hammer motive over and over and over again when coming to the material. So when I first did a Enneagram tester, it was like a one sheet. I think I came across as a 5, and it's still the case that other people think that I might be a 5, and I identify most like with 8s in my heart and mind. I think I would see myself as an 8 or a 5. But as you all know, I didn't actually even get into the instincts and subtypes really till recently. I'm a counter type. I've kind of always known that I'm a lot different than other ones. And yet when the description of motive is there, like it's very, very core to who I am, even though it materializes very different in me than a lot of the ones that I see. Wisdom, it seems to me, is the word here, especially for teachers and those leading others into type, is that obviously if you're a teacher of this material, knowing that this might be one of the real things and having that in the back of your mind, really important.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right, Jeff. And I think you guys would agree that we oftentimes move to behavior and make that mistake. And we start to type other people based on behavior. And so I think knowing the subtypes a little earlier can help you to see those lookalikes and then make the course correction. No, actually, it's 1s and 5s look similar, but there's differences under the hood. So let's talk about those. But I think that the normal process, if people are going to get into this for the long term and really pay attention and do the work, they could go to your self-typing podcast, which is great. And
that would be the Start Here podcast.
Yeah. And they can go through and you could learn about all the different motivations and take the time to do that work without even mentioning subtypes and then be able to find your type. But again, I think that everybody's trying to do quick tests and find out quickly. There's just all that misinformation. So I think as a 3, I kind of like who's like pragmatic and wants to go about it efficiently and avoid some of those mistakes. I just think the subtypes can help us to course correct in the early stages of typing and subtyping. So the second thing that I think it's helpful for is kind of clarifying the work that you need to do and prevent you from making excuses. We know this to be true of just when you're doing regular typing and trying to find out which of the 9 types you are. We can make excuses, or we can kind of skirt around beat around the bush. So like, for example, I just did a training with a nonprofit, and there was one guy in particular that just was not letting anyone pin him down or was unwilling to sort of identify with any type. So everyone, and the reason why they brought me in is because they want to actually use the Enneagram to help team chemistry, productivity. And there's this one guy that they're having trouble with that they didn't know what to do with. And they were hoping that this day would actually help this guy. But this guy kept saying, no, I don't really identify with any of them. And so I can see myself in all of them. And, when somebody does that, like, I can see myself in all 9 types. Well, then it prevents them from actually buckling down and
Sure.
putting bullet points on the page of, okay, here are the things that, that resonate with me and that I need to work on. So that's what I'm saying is it doesn't allow you to make excuses or think more highly of yourself. It really, I think it's another step towards doing more good work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we're going to keep coming back to this, that those are all great examples of how the instincts point us toward like the way our energy is spent in order to achieve our motivation. And the helpfulness there is like what as people who are learning, trying to grow, trying to get more and more insight, and the instincts really help us understand how our energy is spent. And I think this is one of the big things that has come out from my own experience with this journey is I am much more aware of how my social instinct energy is spent in my life in general. And even to the point of wondering that if I didn't have a chronic pain disease, maybe I wouldn't have developed my self-preservation instinct as much, because my social instinct comes out so much when I'm with other people and I spend a lot of time with other people. If I am spending less time with my spouse and at work, what am I gaining? Why am I doing that? And noticing where that motivation uses the energy to try and get it to get fulfilled. As people who are doing this work, I don't think that like most of us will probably hit some type of wall where we can't really do much more without paying attention to the instincts.
For us, and this is what our second book is about. For us, there is a system for learning this material and diving into it, and it's across disciplines, whether you got into physics or theology, or if I'm studying Latin literature, I need to learn Latin first, and some of that can be kind of thick, and I'm getting a foundation for the language. Once I have the language in hand, then I can go to some of the basic texts and start to enjoy them. But true pleasure is going to arrive when I get into some of the great masterpieces, down the road, where I have the foundation, I've mastered some of the core concepts, and now I get to push into these like really enjoyable things. Or like people who get into physics, physics can be very, again, kind of boring at those foundational levels, but people who really nerd out on this stuff have spent a lot of time, and they're able to talk at a level where the details come forth. And I feel like Enneagram's like that. So for TJ and I, when getting into your type, you need to know your motive. You need to probably be introduced to your stance in your intelligence center. And in my mind, you should know what your affect is, because a lot of times just understanding how you connect with other people, those three things are going to be core: your center, your stance, and your affect. Once you get there, then it's time to talk with other people. It's time to understand who they are, understand yourself. Once you can get that sort of stuff in mind, then being able to name your low side, and you brought this up, Tyler, being able to name your low side is probably the first step in my mind to doing some real work with this material. So as a one, if I understand that I'm angry at myself, that probably is going to take me a good year to get some new habits around. And I don't need to do 82 things to improve my life the first year that I know the Enneagram. In fact, that would probably be a bad thing if I try to fly through this material. I need to know about stance work next. I need to know that I'm repressed in my thinking. I need to know the high side of my number. I need to know what like the target kind of looks like. What is the holy idea associated with my number? What's the virtue associated with my number? And I need to really sink into the heart's message. Those for TJ and I, those are the first 6 steps. And that creates the foundation for real health in our minds in terms of understanding the Enneagram. Once you get to step 6, take a break from this material and then start over again and know your type again. And that second time you come to knowing your type, then you can jump into coping style and the arrows. Those strike me as really important. And eventually, once you've kind of got some of this down, I think subtypes and instincts can absolutely play into our conversations, but you need to establish that foundation by which you understand everything else. And so I suppose that's how I come to this. And with a huge, tip of the cap to our friends who actually start here, because you can start with instincts and just forego motive altogether. Are you the sort of person who, when things break, looks to preserve yourself in your space, take care of yourself, or do you immediately pivot to serving one other person or the group? And just that question, you can start from ground zero with that question if you want to. Connecting that question to the huge realm of knowledge that is the Enneagram and your own self-understanding, that's a different move. And so I suppose that's, if I was being prescriptive, which I do, that's how we would come across, is like, here's we're going to build a building. The building is your soul in understanding of your motive and how it materializes in the world. Understanding how that building has been constructed, this is what it probably looks like for us. There's lots of ways to get to self-understanding, but we think that these are the best channels through which self-understanding occurs so that you can get up to those higher levels of.
Yeah, the Enneagram types were created, and then we're looking around for other systems to interface with the Enneagram. And so the instincts were just one way of, hey, what if we took these 9 types and interfaced them with these 3 instincts?
Agreed.
How could that nuance the types? And you could do that in different ways. You could just do a introversion, extroversion.
Yep.
Interfacing with each type. You could do, like I talked with the Enneagram for the Culture podcast ladies who are both therapists for my last summit. We talked about how like African American 8s look different. You can nuance each of the types by race, or you could say, how does a type 3 look different in Australia than South America? Because South America is very 7-ish, and Australia, I've heard, is very 9-ish in certain places. So you could nuance them by countries. So there's so many different ways you could nuance each type. There's blood issues, ink issues, and pencil issues. Like the blood issues are the things that you would die for. The pen issues are the things that you can persuade others on that are written in ink, a little more permanent. And then the pencil issues are those that you could talk about, but then maybe erase tomorrow because they're just opinions.
Well, before we move on, I want to say something about that idea of making excuses. Which I don't think this is specific to instincts, but I think that if any of us, as we're doing this work, we learn something about our type or even our instinct, and it in our mind, it excuses the way that we do things, I think we're in dangerous territory anyway. All of this information can help us understand why we do things, but it never gives us an excuse. Like it never says it's okay to do these things. And so one of the ways that instincts can help us see our type more clearly is seeing that. I love your example about 3s. Most of the time, 3s are going to be a little bit more sort of boastful, and then there are 3s who are not boastful. And understanding that the fact that you aren't boastful isn't a good thing in and of itself, I think, is a great forward movement moment for 3s. And if you aren't paying attention to the instinct, then you might see that as a more healthy move. And now it's an excuse, and that's a problem. If you learn that that's actually a reason and not an excuse, then you can start to address the behavior.
Right on.
We
TJ.
should never be using the Enneagram to make excuses for our behavior.
And never typing someone else or subtyping them.
That's the number one rule.
That's right, TJ. That's good. That's good. Okay, so here are some opinions that I will anticipate pushback on, but I think just good to wrestle with out in the open. But one is that I would say the instincts and subtypes, I think it's helpful to kind of distinguish the two, because I first encountered the subtype descriptions before I actually learned more about the instincts in those gears, as Jeff likes to say. So I would say that the instincts are dynamic, and the subtypes or subtype descriptions are more fixed. So I kind of want to tease that out a little bit. So I agree with Jeff that the instincts are sort of like gears that we can shift into. But I think it's helpful maybe to clarify that that doesn't mean that our subtype will shift throughout the day as we're shifting these instinct gears. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. So I think that of the subtype descriptions is more like fixed portraits that won't change throughout your life, or maybe might change once, like very rarely. And again, I'll explain more as we go along. But I have two sort of illustrations. One is, if you were just think of the Enneagram as 9 colors, the 9 types as 9 colors. If you mix one of them with the red, with like the sexual or pairing instinct, or mix one of the types with blue, like a social instinct, or green for self-preservation, it sort of creates new colors on a paint swatch. And I think that's what Naranjo and Echazo what we're doing is, and Echazo first, and then Naranjo. There's like, oh, how does the types or these 9 points intersect with these instincts? What happens when you get these? When you combine these, and sort of a new color comes out, and just in the way that we mix colors and put them on the paint swatches. So there's like blue, then there's like sea green, and all these different shades. I feel like they took the instincts, mixed them with the 9 types or 9 colors, and it sort of came out a different shade. And then that shade now is on a paint swatch, just like it is at Home Depot's paint stand. And that's sort of one expression of the color. And so I think it's helpful to say, here's like one expression of type 3. Here's another way that expression of a type 3. Here's a third expression of a type 3. And so it's just clarifying that they can look very different. And again, it's outward. It's like behavior. Here are the behaviors. Here's how they might, like a self-pres 9 might come out witty or more sarcastic. So it's like an external expression or behavior, but that's not the reason why you're a type 9. It's just, here are 3 portraits, and they seem pretty fixed. And I don't think they're going to change much. But that's a different conversation than how you use the sexual instinct, or how you switch into the sexual or pairing instinct that day. So I think you need to separate them a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yes, but so I love that you pick the color metaphor, because if you think about like there are 9 colors, and then we add a little bit of red to each color, and we get a sexual instinct, a sexual subtype. You add a little bit of blue to each color, you get a social instinct or subtype. You add a little bit of yellow in there, and you get a different kind of flavor, a different subtype. But also, all of those are still only signposts. They're representatives. So even when you're talking about, let's say 9 is purple, that still encases a huge spectrum of color. And so if you add a little bit of red to that, you're still talking about a huge spectrum of color for sexual 9s, right? And so I think that it's understanding that there are subtypes, I think, is really good, because there are, like, this subject has been around for longer than I've been alive, and there are people who have contributed greatly to the understanding that there are subtypes, and I can't deny that. But I don't think that it's helpful for all of us to say that each person has a subtype. I think that both things can exist in my mind.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
And just my experience, and so again, this is all in pencil. Like if someone is green and they're sea green, and they're like, are they blue or are they green? I don't know. They kind of look 1 in 5.
Sure.
They look, to me, in my experience, people, their temperaments and how we view them and how we experience them, they don't change too much throughout their life. The people that, like my wife, who's a dominant self-pres 6. Like I've been married to her for quite a while, and her temperament and she doesn't change much.
Sure.
And I feel like me as a self-pres 3, I can look back I just feel like I haven't changed much.
Mhm.
Yes, when I was dating, I looked very much like a sexual 3,
Mhm.
or dominant in the sexual 3. And actually, my friends, Lindsay Frazier and Dr. Sam Greenberg, who I was going to mention later, they do a lot of teaching on sexuality and Enneagram.
Mhm.
And they say that in relationships, the sexual gear, that pairing gear, there's a flooding that happened flooding that happens in the early stages of your relationship. So no matter if you're like self-pres dominant or social dominant, like everyone's sexual gear, that sexual pairing gets flooded, and so everyone looks like they're sexual dominant because there's a lot of energy moving in that direction to make that relationship work.
Sure.
But then they said, a year into marriage, 2 years into marriage, that flooding goes down, and you go
Mhm.
back to your dominant instinct again, which can be very confusing for
Sure.
people in relationships.
Mm.
But I tend to think that you don't change very much. And I think of it like, color changing nail polish, where you, depending on the circumstances and environment, it may change color based on the temperature, but then at the end of the day, it'll go back to what it was before. That's just, I feel like, kind of my experience so far.
Yeah, but before we transition to the next question, so I wanted to make 3 points. The first is, I think when the illustration about colors is exactly why we say instincts and subtypes make everything messy.
Mhm.
Messy can be fantastic for somebody who has a great foundation of understanding, because you want more interesting things to talk about. What's the difference between a Porsche 911 and a Porsche 944? You need to understand what a car is, what an engine is, what a carburetor is, what an exhaust system is, what a steering wheel is first. And then we can talk about the really intricate nuances of all of the different styles of your particular model. That's, I suppose, where my mind goes. This is much more about how do I serve people getting into Enneagram than it is about my own self-understanding as somebody using the Enneagram. Like, I'm all about using subtypes and instincts and jumping into that conversation now. But for somebody who's just getting into it, just notice if you come out and you say there's 27 colors, oh wait, stacking, there's 54 colors. Oh wait, there's wings. There's 108 colors. That can just be kind of overwhelming to somebody who's jumping in and trying to navigate the nuance. So simplicity, I think, should be a goal for communicators, for teachers, and especially for people who are jumping in, for the first year or 2. So I didn't get into instincts for 7 years. Not that my story is prescriptive, but I feel like I did quite well with the Enneagram. You can get there through this path, and I would champion it as a worthy path. The second thing, and I think this is, I share your intuitions here, Tyler, that there is so much that I see in my identity that seems tied to my dominant instinct that I'm moved to use the term subtype. And during our study, this was the primary challenge for me. I kept kind of going back and forth in my mind. Is my dominant instinct an identity claim? This is who you are. Or is it a tool claim? This is the sort of tool you can use to fulfill your motive. And those are very, very different. And in terms of Enneagram theory, I don't even need to give you the right answer right here. I want to say that's the question. And until you understand that question, you're not actually doing work at this level. Is your dominant instinct part of your identity, or is it a tool? And I just want to, we obviously spent a lot of time on our answer there, but I think we quickly, because we so feel our dominant instinct, we quickly move past the idea that this might just be your favorite tool, and I think it's worth pausing there. So with your pencil in hand, as it were.
Well, that's where I was going to go next,
Yeah.
Jeff. But I can let TJ, if he wants to say anything as well. That's where I was going next, and I actually have a car metaphor that to build off of what you just said. But I just wanted to say first with the color thing, I think what we could, how much we talk about instincts or how much we get into subtypes is debatable. I really like that value of simplicity, Jeff, and feel like I'm right with you there. But for the color thing, maybe we could find common ground. And if teachers know that there's a few different shades, there's green, there's sea green, and that, again, that we can help people to realize, yes, the sea green may look a blue, but that doesn't mean they're a blue. It's all about motivations and the core motivations underneath. Like if we can get there quicker, to avoid confusion and typing, because we always go to behavior by default. We need to pull people back. Then I think those descriptions or simple descriptions may be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is really important to acknowledge that this has been your experience, Tyler, and this has been your experience, Jeff. And like it makes sense to talk about subtypes. It doesn't fit for me. I see a lot more fluidity in my own life. And so I am a big part of why I am sort of like planting my flag in this idea that subtypes aren't necessarily as fixed for a lot of people, is that is not how I have come to this. And I think there are a lot of other people like me, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who find this really like this more like pinpointed just ideas about the instincts. I think there are people who need that, especially countertypes. And there are other people like me who need to hear, oh yeah, don't worry about subtypes. It's not a thing that you're going to have to worry about. Yeah.
That's good, TJ. Yeah. And I might be right there with you. Maybe if you take me out for steak or something, and
I'd go for a steak.
I'll fully agree with you.